Hi everyone. For Unit 2, I wanted you to look at Chapter 7, Chapter 8, and Chapter 13, and I hope you found them to be a good source of information on not only the power of observation and systematic approaches to screening students for emotional behavioral disorders, but also when we got to the section on social skills in Chapter 8 and how important those were. I'm going to talk about those in a second. And then the purpose and function of why children do what they do, the purpose and function of their behavior. So we're going to look at those three things. I originally wanted to do 3 videos, but by those same topics that I just mentioned. But I decided to do just one, and partly because I don't want to just talk for the sake of talking and go over all the stuff that you have just read. But I did want to add a few things to it and highlight a few things that I think that the authors did particularly well. So I want to start really Chapter 7, where it talks about screening and identification. The authors do, I think, a really good job of highlighting the importance of screening. And one of the things that they say is that, you know, the reason early screening is so important, and we sometimes forget or even not even pay much attention to screening for emotional disorders or problems or behavior problems early on, because we use the catch method. You know, we hope to just pick them up and then deal with them then. However, it's good to see that schools have within their mindset today this prevention mindset, which is fantastic. But still, even in using the prevention approach or what, you know, universal design methods or prevention of behavior or learning problems, and that's in our mentality today, and even though that's good, the authors make a good case for even using screening tools school-wide to try to pick up on these emotional and behavioral disorders that some children have that we don't catch early, especially internalizing disorders like anxiety disorders or depression, which, if you follow the news, you see it's on the rise in young children. And anxiety is one of those things that we are seeing a dramatic increase in a lot of students. And you know, I think now when we're bringing in refugees from other parts of the world, we see a lot of stress-related, anxiety-related, post-traumatic stress disorder-related types of things in school children more and more. And even in North American children, we're seeing it as well. So they do a really good job in Chapter 7 of talking about the problem with if left unidentified, nothing really gets done. And so, you know, why does it matter? Why does it matter if an anxiety disorder, for instance, is left unidentified? Well, you know and I know that children will never experience optimal learning environments if they have emotional behavioral disorders that aren't undetected and untreated. And I think the authors do an excellent job of that, and talking to us about a number of screeners that we can use. Now, on the Moodle site, and I wrote down the title here because it's an awful Unit 2 title. It's Screening, Assessment, Diagnosis, and Monitoring main page. Under that main page, you'll see that I've listed 6 screening tools and links to each of those screening tools. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up, and I want to mention this first, that if I were you, I would go to the bottom of that list, and number 6 is where I would start. If you haven't already done so, I would go to number 6, and the reason is because when you open up number 6 of our screening tools, you will see a series of short videos that actually talk about all of the screening tools. And guess who the authors are? 2 of the authors in Chapter 7, Dr. Kathleen Lane and Dr. Wendy Oakes, they are the 2 people who are, you'll see them face-to-face speaking in short videos about all of these screening tools and the necessity and the importance of these tools. So I'd ask you to check those out. So that's Chapter 7. I thought they did a wonderful job of talking about screening and identifying children with emotional and behavioral disorders. Now Chapter 8 seems to go off in another direction with social skills. Now originally I wanted to talk to you about 21st century social skills. And I just did, you know, you could do this yourself. You can do a real quick search on any provincial website today in Canada, and they talk about teaching 21st century skills. And when you look at a lot of the skills, it's basically the same skills that you and I were taught when we were kids. It's just that there's there's a new element to it, more of a technological element, and asking kids to be more savvy around social networks that are electronic instead of face-to-face. And there are many other differences, but that's generally it. We were taught these skills too as kids, at least I hope we were. But anyway, I went on the website today and I said, I'll just go check to see what other people are identifying as 21st century skills. Not social skills yet, but 21st century skills. And here's a few of them, and you've heard this 100 times too. Critical thinking skills, problem skills, reasoning, analysis, interpretation, research skills, creativity, civic, ethical, and social justice literacy, economic and financial literacy, entrepreneurialism, global awareness, and on and on and on. But when you look at the specific social skills that we're asking our students to acquire, just listen to this list for a moment, because this is important. When you think about asking our students to have social skills, just think about this for a minute. Listening skills, asking good questions, asking other people's point of view or seeing other people's point of view, teamwork, collaboration, cooperation, negotiation, compromise, not getting your own way, putting off getting a reward or delaying gratification, advocacy, fairness, all of those things, those are big skills. And when you talk to any adult who has any issues in their marriage, for instance, or relationships within their family, these are still things that pop up for you and me. And so sometimes kids get in an awful lot of trouble with social skills, and we assume that they know them. And I think the authors of Chapter 8 did a wonderful job. They talked about identifying the nature of social skill deficits in children. And once you do that, it's very important, because then you know how to address those social skill deficits. For example, I love this. And this, by the way, this applies to both internalizing and externalizing disorders. Sometimes we think of, oh, Johnny is rude and he's abrupt and he does this and he does that, and he has oppositional defiant disorder, or he has ADHD, and we say, these externalizing disorders have social skills problems. But so do internalizing disorders have social skills problems. Children with anxiety have social skills problems, and different types of fears, and so on and so on. So we have to recognize that both externalizing and internalizing disorders can be manifested in social skills deficits. And your authors use two broad categories, or two types that I really like. Acquisition deficits, that means that the child can't do it, and performance deficits, and that means the child won't do it. And how you understand which type of deficit the child has goes a long way to determining what you're going to do about it. For example, if a child has an acquisition deficit and they haven't acquired the skill yet, like they don't have good listening skills, or they don't take another person's perspective because they don't know how, or they don't even know how to ask a girl on a date or something like that, these are deficits that are remediated through direct, explicit instruction, modeling, practice, and mentoring, and feedback. When I worked in the prison setting, I was a very blunt person, very candid with my students, because they were very blunt and candid with me. And some of the guys, because we had all guy classes, all girl classes, and some of the guys would talk about how they tried to acquire dates with girls, and I apologize if this is a little crude. But some of the guys would come up to me and say, yeah, I got home on a free weekend, a low security kid, and he got a weekend pass, and there's a girl in my neighborhood, and I really like her. I went up there and asked her if I could have sex with her. And I'm like, whoa, wait, what are you talking about? He says, well, I wanted to have sex with her, so I just went up and asked her. I asked her if she wanted, and he put it in his own terms. I could assume that he was just rude and obnoxious. And I asked him, has anybody ever taught you how to ask a girl out for a date? He goes, yeah, I just go ask her this way. And I go, no. Has anybody actually sat down and teach you how to talk to a young woman respectfully, to think from her point of view, to think about what she wants and how she thinks, and just to talk and listen and actually have fun just sitting and talking and listening? And have you ever asked a girl out for a date? Here these guys, coming from very rough homes and so forth, had said, no, nobody's ever told me how to do that. I've always wanted to. I always assumed. And they would tell me about all the things that they assumed. And so I think it's very important for us as instructors, as educators, not to assume, but simply to find out whether the child has acquired these skills, or if they're a deficit is because they have an acquisition deficit. That's an awful story, not a good story. But anyway, you get the point. The other type of deficit is performance deficit. These are a little more harder to deal with, and it takes more work, because this is a child who knows how to behave socially, knows what they should do socially, but doesn't want to. They're not motivated to. And as the chapter talked about, as the authors talked about, they said for a performance deficit, a little more work here because you're dealing with motivational issues. So you need now to deal with the antecedents of that behavior and the consequences of that behavior. And we do apply behavioralism. We do manipulate the antecedents and the consequences in order to get the types of responses from the child that they should have. And we start to act in certain ways that support the behavior that we want or reinforce the behavior we want. And that brings us right to chapter 13. And you may ask why these were linked. Because some of these social skills behaviors that we're not getting because children don't want to give you that behavior, or they're avoiding certain behaviors, or they're doing certain types of behavior, the next thing we have to do is find out why. Why on earth are they acting the way that they're acting? Why on earth are they doing this? Are they avoiding something? Do they want power? Do they want attention? Do they want a particular object or something that they can get? So, chapter 13, I think, and I'm just bringing over some notes I have on chapter 13, it talks to us about the purpose of behavior and what purpose that behavior serves, or its function. There's always a purpose to our behavior. There's always a function for every one of our behaviors, yours and mine included. And when we figure out the function, then we can seek ways to give that child what they need in an appropriate way. In other words, we replace the inappropriate behavior with an appropriate behavior to get what they need. And I often say to my students, if a student needs attention, you know what you should do? You should give it to them. They need attention. But they need to get attention or seek attention in appropriate ways. And so we teach them and help them to apply appropriate responses and ways to get what they need. Now, I'm just going to finish with this final comment, is that I think behavior and the functions of behavior are too complex for individuals to figure out on their own. And I'm a big believer in the collaborative approach, that teachers, whether they use different types of rating scales and they compare notes, or observation and they compare notes, I think it's too big of a task for any one individual to do alone. There was some well-written work out of Peabody College, which is at Vanderbilt University, and I believe it was Doug and Lynn Fuchs that wrote an article on teachers are imperfect tests. And whether we like to admit it or not, teachers are indeed imperfect tests. We all make mistakes. We don't have perfect observation. We're not the perfect assessment tool. We're not the perfect observation tool. So it's always best to work with others to say, am I seeing this right? Am I seeing what I think? Is this what you think is the function of the behavior for this child? And when we work in teams, we have better solutions and we have better assessment. All right, well, I hope all of you have had a wonderful family day. I hope you're doing well. I know I'm hearing from some of you who are saying, I'm really busy right now. Thanks for the extension on that assignment that we had to do. Listen, we all are busy, right? And I don't want to leave everything to the end so it piles up. But if you ever do need an extra few days, all I'm concerned about is that this course benefits you. And the schedule that I've put to you is a suggested schedule. So if you say, look, I need another week, I need another few days, don't hesitate to ask for it. Just look at the end now and remember, don't let this come back and pile up on you and haunt you. You have to get some of this work done. But if you need time, like me, you've been very gracious. I announced that I was going to do all these videos for this course, but you've been very gracious. Nobody's complained, as far as I know. And you've been very gracious for me. I want to be gracious for you. So if we can work together on this, negotiate a schedule, and if you're having trouble getting work done, just say, look, I need an extension. That's all you need to do. All right? So cheers for now. Talk later, and I hope you have a great week.